My son told strangers I was confused, not because I was, but because it made my house easier to take. They planned it quietly, smiled while doing it. I stayed silent longer than I should have, until one envelope changed everything. If your family started speaking for you, would you stay quiet or take your name back? Like, comment, and subscribe if this hits close. The first time my son called me confused, it wasn't at home. It was in front of strangers. We were standing in a small real estate office in Ohio. Beige walls, cheap coffee smell, papers spread out like they owned the place. The agent smiled at me, then looked at my son. "She forgets things," he said casually. "I handle her finances now." I laughed, not because it was funny, because my body didn't know what else to do. I wasn't confused. I knew exactly where I was. I knew exactly whose house we were talking about. The house I paid off 30 years ago. My daughter-in-law didn't look at me once. She tapped her nails on the table and said, "It's just easier this way, Mom." Mom. That word hit harder than the sentence before it. The agent slid a paper toward my son, not me. My name was on the deed, but suddenly I wasn't in the conversation. I sat there holding my purse, the same one I'd carried since my husband passed, while my own child explained my life like I was already gone. And the worst part? I realized this wasn't a mistake. This had been planned. Because no one looks that calm when they're lying for the first time. And that's when I wondered, how long had they been waiting to say this out loud? After that day, things changed quietly. Not loud enough for neighbors to notice, not cruel enough to complain about, just small things. My mail started disappearing. Bills I used to open myself were already opened, sometimes already paid. Sometimes not. When I asked, my daughter-in-law smiled. "Don't worry about that stuff anymore." At dinner, they spoke over me, about taxes, about renovations, about future plans. They stopped asking what I wanted. They started telling me what was happening. The guest room became temporary. My old bedroom got measured one afternoon while I was still sitting in it. I'd find sticky notes on the fridge reminding me to turn off the stove, notes I never asked for. I stopped correcting them, not because they were right, because every time I spoke, the room went quiet in a way that made me feel small. My son avoided my eyes. He hugged me longer than usual, like guilt had weight. I folded my own laundry while listening to them plan a vacation using the money from the account I built one paycheck at a time. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, replaying every sacrifice, every late shift, every meal skipped so he could have more. And I kept asking myself one question. If I speak up now, will I lose him completely? The line was crossed at church. After service, during coffee and cookies, my daughter-in-law laughed loudly and said, "We're handling Mom's estate now. She's getting forgetful." People turned, smiled politely, and nodded. Someone patted my arm and said, "It's good you have family." I stood there holding a paper cup that was suddenly shaking. My son added, "We just want to protect her assets." Assets, like I was a storage unit, not a person. That same week, a bank teller asked my son to confirm withdrawals for me while I stood right there. I watched my signature get questioned, my memory discussed, my dignity folded up like an old receipt. No one asked me anything. Later that day, my daughter-in-law posted online about caring for aging parents with a photo of my house in the background. The comments praised her, called her strong, selfless. I sat at the kitchen table reading those words while realizing my name wasn't attached to my own life anymore. That night, I didn't cry. I felt something colder. Because humiliation doesn't always make you loud. Sometimes it makes you very, very clear. And I became clear about one thing. They thought love meant silence. I spent weeks fighting myself. I remembered my son as a boy with scraped knees, waiting up for me after night shifts. I remembered counting coins at the kitchen table so he could play baseball. I told myself he didn't mean it this way. But then I remembered his voice in that office, calm, practiced. Love doesn't sound rehearsed. One evening, I found an old photo album in the closet, pictures of my late husband, us holding keys to this house on closing day. I sat on the floor and cried quietly so no one would hear. Not because of the house, because I realized I'd been shrinking to stay included. And that's when something inside me shifted. Not anger, resolve. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to punish anyone. I just wanted my name back. The next morning, I put on my coat and drove myself downtown. No announcement, no explanation. I walked into an attorney's office with my hands shaking and my head clear. For the first time in months, someone looked directly at me and asked, "What do you want?" And I answered without hesitation, "I want peace, and I want it done right." But I still didn't know, would doing the right thing cost me my son forever? I moved slowly, carefully. I updated documents, changed account access, placed my home into a trust with one condition: my consent stayed required. I didn't confront anyone. I smiled. I listened. I let them believe the story they'd written. Then came the dinner. My son announced plans to refinance my house. Already booked, already discussed. I waited until everyone finished talking. Then I slid one envelope across the table. Inside were copies. Not threats, not drama, just facts. The room went silent. My daughter-in-law's smile froze. My son's face drained of color. "You can't do this," she said. I nodded. I already did. No yelling, no tears, just truth. I stood up, thanked them for dinner, and went to my room. For the first time, my door locked behind me felt like safety. They didn't speak to me for days, then weeks, but something strange happened. I slept better. Because power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just quietly returns home. And I knew the hardest part was yet to come. A month later, my son came alone. He didn't argue. He didn't defend. He said, "I didn't think you'd fight back." That sentence told me everything. I told him calmly, "I didn't fight you. I protected myself." He cried, "I didn't. Not because I felt nothing, but because I felt finished." I stayed in my home, on my terms, with my name clear and my choices respected. They never apologized publicly, but they never spoke for me again, and that was enough, because dignity doesn't need witnesses, it just needs boundaries. I learned something late in life. Love without respect becomes control. Silence without peace becomes surrender. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if someone is slowly rewriting your story, ask yourself, are you being cared for or quietly erased? And if this story made you feel seen, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs courage, and tell me, what would you do if your own family crossed that line?